I'm going to be sharing just a lot more practical tips and giving you more of what you asked for. So really, really excited about that. I'm really excited to dive into a more intentional and thoughtful approach to the podcast in season 2. Hey, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, founder of Honeybee Bold and fellow bold woman in business. This show is all about highlighting women who are changing the world, helping other women, and kicking ass along the way. Let's dive in. If you are listening to this episode the day it comes out, it is December 30th, 2024, which is bonkers. I feel like I say that every year around this time, where it's just like this year flew by. It's been just a roller coaster, and there's been so much that has happened, and it's hard to believe we are at the end of a year and entering a new year. And this year has had a lot of ups and downs, and I wanted to reflect a little bit, but this episode is also extra exciting and special because it is episode 15 of the Bold Women in Business podcast. And that means that we are at the end of season 1, which also is bonkers. I had this idea to launch a podcast probably a year ago. I don't know. It's been a while. It took me quite a bit of time to get the wheels in motion, but less time than it could have, because I could have just dragged my feet and kept pushing it off. And I think that probably was what I would have done. But I had a business coach who really encouraged me to just take the plunge and launch the podcast. And so I did. And it's been such an interesting journey, such an interesting learning opportunity. And I really used this first season as a learning opportunity, as one big experiment. And I have learned so much, and it is really setting me up for a different mindset going into season 2. We are going to be taking a little bit of a break from the podcast so that I can get the pieces in order for season 2, because there are going to be a lot of changes. So this episode is going to be a reflection on 2024, the lessons that I have learned in my business, and kind of a preview of what's to come in 2025, both in my business and for the podcast. So I hope you enjoy these reflection episodes. If not, I'll see you in season 2. But I hope you get something out of listening to my experience. So season 1 of this podcast has been all about highlighting bold women in business, right? That's the name of the podcast. And that's not going to change in season 2. But a big lesson that I've learned from this first season is the focus on just highlighting women. I think that we have learned so much from the women that we've heard from. But I actually did a poll on LinkedIn. I don't know if you participated in that poll, but a couple of weeks ago, I posted a poll just asking what people are hoping to get more of from me in season 2. And the winner by and far was more practical tips. People want to really get something very practical and actionable from the podcast. And that totally makes sense. I also listen to a ton of podcasts in the marketing and business and branding space and otherwise, right? I listen to a lot of jujitsu podcasts and other things that I'm interested in. And I also love getting some practical tips, right? There are some podcasts that I listen to that are almost like a mini course. Each episode is just this mini bite-sized course in something practical. And so I think that that's something that I want to bring more into season 2. I want to still highlight incredible women who are doing incredible things and learn from their stories and from their challenges and from the things that they've gained experience in over their time in business. But I also want to leave you with some very practical, actionable tips in the branding space, in marketing, in messaging. That's something that's going to be a very big focus of 2025, is much more focus on messaging. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But that's basically what you can expect from season 2. There will be a mix of kind of similar to this season where it was a mix of interview episodes with solo episodes. And I think there might be a little bit more emphasis on solo episodes. So hopefully you like hearing from me, but I'm going to be sharing just a lot more practical tips and giving you more of what you asked for. So really, really excited about that. I'm really excited to dive into a more intentional and thoughtful approach to the podcast in season 2. Not that this season wasn't intentional and thoughtful, but like I said, it was also one big experiment. So I was kind of just testing the waters, seeing how things went, and the feedback has been really, really incredible. So thank you everyone who has listened. One ask that I have before I move on to the next part of this episode is if you have enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you could go to your podcast platform of choice and rate and review the pod. It makes a huge difference to the growth of the podcast and how easy it is for people to find it. And I'm just really grateful to everyone who has rated and reviewed the podcast. If you haven't done so, please go do that. It takes like 3 seconds and it means so much. So now I want to talk a little bit about reflecting on 2024 as a whole and what's to come in 2025. So as I've shared in lots of different places, I don't think I officially talked about it on the podcast yet, but I talked about it on other people's podcasts. I just passed my 2-year anniversary of my business, which is really exciting. I didn't totally know what to expect when I officially went out on my own. I always knew that I wanted to start my own business. And I've talked before about the path that I took to make sure that I had the skills that I wanted to have before I made that switch and quit my full-time job and just went all in on my business. So you can go back and listen to one of my previous episodes about that. But I did not know what my business would look like exactly. And I could not have predicted that I would be doing branding and web design. That wasn't exactly the path that I envisioned when I went out on my own. But it's been really an incredible and incredibly rewarding journey and something that I really love. I really love building websites for people. 2024 has been this transformative year, both in terms of honing in on what it is that I want to offer, right? I've really niched down into saying I am offering branding and web design. That's the core offering that I have. The other piece that I went through is I went through a full rebrand of my own company in, I think it was March or April of this year. And the process really started in January. I kind of kicked off the year knowing that I wanted to go through a rebrand. And so I rebranded. I used to be Honeyman Creative Solutions. I was basically just a content marketer, kind of wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot of different things. And the beginning of 2024 was this shift to who I want to work with, what I want to offer, how I want to position my brand. And so I really went through that process that I take my own clients through. And I can't even tell you how valuable that was, both for me and for my clients, to really put myself in those shoes and go through that process myself. And so I rebranded to Honeybee Bold, which really, really encapsulates what it is that I want to do. My brand is really strong and recognizable and all the things that I want to give to my clients as well. And I've also gotten really clear on who I want to work with, right? I'm working with female entrepreneurs who are doing really mission-driven work. They're trying to make a bigger impact in the world. They're trying to do something really meaningful. And so I've worked with women who are coaches and trying to help people get more joy from their careers. And I've also worked with a lot of nonprofits who are doing just unbelievable work. I've worked with a wide range of clients this year, really focused on women who are trying to really make an impact in the world. And so I view my job as helping to facilitate that, right? The impact that they have is only going to be so much greater because of the work that we do together. And so that's just incredibly rewarding for me to be able to have that impact that goes far beyond just my clients, but also their clients and the work that they're doing. And I'm just so grateful every day to be able to do that work. So 2024 has really been all about honing my brand, really getting strong and solid in my brand and what I do and who I work with. What I've noticed over the last couple of months is this need to get a lot clearer on what my packages look like, and the full scope of my offerings. And that's going to be a big shift in 2025. Not a big shift in the sense that I'm not going to be doing branding and web design anymore. I'm still going to be doing branding and web design. But what I've realized is that just going through the process of working with these incredible clients that I've worked with, the core challenge that I have noticed for every single one of my clients and every single potential client, everyone who comes to me, they're drawn to me for a reason. And they come to me and they say the same thing. It's almost uncanny when I hear the exact same thing over and over. The core challenge is I do something special and unique and helpful for my clients. I'm talking as my clients, right? I know that I do something special and unique and meaningful and necessary, but I don't know how to convey that in clear messaging that is meaningful and impactful for the people that I'm trying to reach. I don't know how to capture that. And so that's why they're coming to me. Because my superpower is listening to them, really, really listening. And you can go back and listen to, I think it was episode 2 or 3 or something like that, where it's really about the idea of listening deeply and empathetically and really hearing what people are saying, listening underneath what they're saying. So my superpower is listening to my clients and capturing their essence in clear and impactful messaging. And that forms the basis of the brand and website that I built for them. But at my core, I am a messaging expert. Content is my bread and butter. My background is in content marketing. I've been working in content marketing in one form or fashion for 16 years now. I have a master's in English. I'm a writer. That's at my core. I'm a content messaging expert. And I've taken that and transformed it into branding and web design because it's so core to those things. But I am recognizing a need in myself to get back to my roots as a messaging expert, and to more clearly address that core need of my clients. And so what you can expect to see from me in 2025 is just a much clearer pathway to working with me, even if you don't need a website right now, or maybe you never need a website. That'll be an episode maybe in season 2 is when do you actually need a website? Not everyone does. That can be something to talk about. But even if that's not something that you need, if you are not reaching your ideal clients, 9 times out of 10, it's a messaging problem, right? Assuming that you have a good product or service that you're offering, which I'm just going to assume that you have that, right? That piece is a given. You have something unique and special and wonderful and necessary, but you're not able to reach the clients that you want to reach. There's a messaging problem. There's a disconnect in your storytelling. There's a disconnect in your content and how you're reaching them. So I am going to be expanding and refining how you can work with me in a more targeted way to the messaging issue. And that doesn't necessarily have to translate into a website. Part of this is recognizing that I niche down, and I'm a big fan of niching down. I actually just appeared on Rich Brooks' Agents of Change podcast to talk all about how I niche down and what impact that made for my business and why I think that it's so necessary for almost every business. And I'll link to it in the show notes. But in that episode, one of the things that I mentioned is that I actually think that I niched down a little bit too far in terms of my offerings. And I made it a little bit too difficult to work with me, right? You need a brand and website? Great, I can work with you. And I didn't have any other ways of working with me. And I don't want that to be the case. I want to be able to help women who are doing meaningful, impactful work in the ways that they need and meet them where they are. And so that's a big change that's going to be happening in 2025. There's going to be more options, more opportunities to work with me on a smaller scale. And really addressing that core need of how do I fix my messaging problem? So that is something that you can look out for from me in 2025. And I'm really excited to share these changes. I'm excited to share more practical tips on the podcast, more practical tips on LinkedIn. I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, but I have been posting just a lot of fun reels on Instagram. I'm having a lot of fun over there. LinkedIn and my podcast are really my thought leadership platforms, and Instagram is just where I have fun. Whatever you're looking for, I hope that you are following along and finding what you need where you need it. One thing that I want to also address is 2024, in all honesty and transparency, was a difficult year for me. I had a lot of ups and downs in my business. The year started off really, really tough, actually. I heard this from many other business owners in the beginning of 2024. It just was a tough time in the economy, really hard to land clients. It was really tough to make headway in my business. And I think a lot of other business owners had a similar challenge. And then things started to turn around after I went through my rebrand. And that's part of the benefits of niching down. I really saw that firsthand. As soon as I got really clear on my brand, on who I work with, on what I do, things just turned around in a huge way. And that was great. And I'm very grateful for that. But then, it has not just been a one direction from there. It's still been a roller coaster. And that is something that I'm hoping to shift in 2025 as well for myself, is having the roller coaster be a little bit less steep, right? Riding the waves that are hopefully a little bit less steep and more expected. We know that there are going to be waves in business, but the feast or famine thing is just not great. It's just not great. And so we don't want that as entrepreneurs. We want to try to avoid that as much as possible. It is inherent, it is part of entrepreneurship that consistent income is not to be expected, but there are ways to make it a little bit more consistent and a little bit less steep and a little bit more navigable. So that's just something that I wanted to share, is that if you had a tough year this year, you're not alone. It was a roller coaster of a year, not just in business, but in the world, right? There's just been a lot of challenges going on in the world. If you're in the US like I am, who knows what's going to happen next year? I'm not going to get political, but there are a lot of question marks, right? We just don't know kind of what's to come. I think that when there's this question mark looming over us, there's an opportunity to really dive into the things that we can control. And so if you had a tough year this year, if you're feeling really uncertain about the coming year, I urge you to really take a step back and think about what is in your control, right? What can you control this year? What can you control that is not necessarily affected by external factors? And so my brand is just an example of something that I said, you know what? I went through my rebrand at a time when I was not booking clients. I just wasn't. I wasn't booking clients. I was having a really hard time making that connection. And I said, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity to do something that I was planning on doing anyway, but I'm going to take the opportunity to control something that I can control at a time when there are a lot of external factors that are outside my control. And the thing that I could control was getting really clear on my brand, getting really clear on my messaging, and getting really clear on who I want to work with and how I want to work with them. And so that may not be the thing for you to control, although I think probably most businesses can go through that exercise a little bit. But there are probably other things that you can control. And if you're feeling uncertain about what that might be, I'd love to set up a vibe check with you. No obligations for anything. We can just chat and see if there's any way that we can troubleshoot where things might be going wrong in your business and what might make the biggest impact. And, we can just chat for 15 minutes. It can be a quick virtual coffee date, and we can get to know each other and If I can help you, then great. And if not, I'm always happy to refer people to others in my network who might be able to help with a specific issue if I'm not the right one. And I would love to just get to know you. And so if you've been following along and we haven't actually gotten a chance to chat yet, just go to my website and set up a free vibe check. The buttons are all over the place. On my contact page, you can just pick a time on my calendar and let's get to know each other. All right. I'm wishing you the very, very best for 2025. I think it's going to be a really transformative year for so many of us. I think it can be. And I am excited to get to talk to you again in season 2 and come at you with a lot more practical tips, a lot more actionable steps you can take to improve your messaging, your branding, your marketing, and your overall ability to reach your ideal clients. Happy New Year. All right, beautiful humans, that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Bold Women in Business podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rachel Honeyman, with music by Shmukalele. This show is brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, where we build bold, unstoppable brands and websites for kick-ass women in business. If you are a female entrepreneur or dream of being one, and you want to take your business to a level that no one can resist, reach out to me at hey@honeybebold.com for a free vibe check. Honey, be bold. See you next time.